Shock arrows in Breath of the Wild are pretty amazing, right? They are amazing, but they're a dime a dozen in the game, and they're pretty hard to find. The shock arrows literally have the ability to stun enemies in their place, allowing you to literally do whatever you want with them in Breath of the Wild. I do have a lot of new subscribers on the channel mentioning to me that they are literally just now getting a copy of Breath of the Wild, so in today's video, I'd like to walk through exactly where you can find shock arrows in Breath of the Wild, as well as everything you need to know about them. Hey, even if you are a seasoned Breath of the Wild player, this video just might help you out as well. Also, I want to throw in there, if I do miss any specific spots in the game in Breath of the Wild, be sure to drop them in the comments below. You guys already know I am down there talking to you guys. Hello and welcome to Zelda Theory. I'm D-Rock, and this channel is your best source for any and all things Zelda. So if at any time you find value during our conversation today, be sure to subscribe. If you're new, turn on all notifications for weekly Zelda content. You know your time means the absolute world to me, so thank you so much for your support. I appreciate you being here. Elemental variations on standard arrows have been around in Zelda titles for such a long time, with their most notable appearances being in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. In Majora's Mask, you had them as the main dungeon item for all 4 main dungeons. Now in Breath of the Wild, these elemental arrows return in a slightly different way, using ammunition rather than magic, and being readily available from the get-go. Now while light arrows are noticeably absent in Breath of the Wild with the exception of the final fight in the game against Calamity Ganon, they are instead replaced with shock arrows, which, while not as powerful as the light counterparts, can still do some serious damage when wielded by the hero of the wild. Now let's go ahead and jump into some of the more common places you can find shock arrows, and you will come across these points in the game during the story. Now for most of you, the first time you're going to come across the abundance of shock arrows is during the main quest to reclaim Vah Ruta from Water Blight Ganon. Now at the highest point in the area immediately surrounding Zora's domain, you will be sent to the Zora to find at least 20 shock arrows from Ploymus Mountain that have been conveniently shot into trees by a rather moody Lionel, which will continue to spawn even after his quest has been completed. Now along the road up to Zora's domain, you can also find an abundance of Lizalfos that enjoy firing shock arrows at Link with great enthusiasm and terrible accuracy, and it's a good way to get more of them if the Lionel proves to be an issue and starts attacking you. You would think in a game as big as Breath of the Wild, these shock arrows would be available like everywhere at the shops, right? Not really. For the most part, shock arrows aren't really found that often inside shops, as they are normally reserved for fire, ice, or bomb arrows instead. Now that being said, you can actually find shock arrows rather easily in one of Gerudo's town's many stores that specializes in arrows, with Link being able to buy at least one of each arrow from this vendor. Now if you haven't reached this point in the game yet, they can also be found in Laurelin Town's fish market, the Kara Kara Bazaar on the road to Gerudo Town, or the general shop in Korok Forest, if you can actually deal with the frame skips, but I don't want to say too much else. While the fish market and the general shop will always have multiple shock arrows available, the bazaar rotates their stock and they will only have each available at a time, so you kind of have to hit this window if this makes sense. While this makes it harder to find multiple arrows of a specific type needed for any given situation, it does also allow you to always have a place where you can buy at least one of each arrow type, which, I mean, we're going to need more than one arrow, right? Now the other thing I want to touch on is getting the shock arrows in certain quests in the game. Now the only main quest that requires you to find and use shock arrows is the Divine Beast Vah Ruta's main quest. Not only do you need these arrows in order to temporarily shut down Vah Ruta, they're also very useful against the first boss in the game, depending on which road you decide to take. This boss is particularly susceptible to the shock effect. Shock arrows shouldn't be used with caution in the arena, as in the second phase of the fight, however, it is very easy for Link to accidentally electrocute himself while firing shock arrows at Water Blight Ganon. It's kind of like a double-edged sword with the shock arrows because they're really effective against enemies, but they're also really effective on our boy Link. Now let's talk about using the shock arrows in battle specifically. One of the main reasons why shock arrows as well as the shock damage in general are so good in Breath of the Wild is how they interact with equipped weapons. Now when you're hit with any shock damage, both Link as well as the majority of the enemies in the game are going to drop whatever weapon or shield they are holding, with only a small chance of either keeping hold of their items, which is pretty realistic and I love that. This makes them very useful against silver enemies found in later regions of the game, but the effects don't work on all the enemies, which is I think one of the most notable exceptions to the shock arrow effect are the Lynels, which if you haven't came across a Lynel yet, good luck, my friend. The Lynels will never drop their weapons until they are defeated, so Lynels are also one of the more common enemies to use shock arrows themselves and can be a decent source of them if you know how to handle Lynels easily. Let me know if you want me to make a guide on that as well. Drop a comment. Now, as far as resisting shock arrow effects, there are many ways to resist the effects of shock arrows and shock damage, the most readily available being the Thunder Helm, which can be attained by completing a handful of side quests in Gerudo Town and talking to Riju, who will lend Link her Thunder Helm once he has helped enough of her people. Pretty cool. Another wearable item that resists shock damage is the rubber set. It looks terrible, take my word for it, which makes Link immune to all lightning strikes when he is wearing the full set of armor at its second upgraded level or higher. The easiest way to get the rubber set is to finish the From the Ground Up side quest, which will result in a vendor called Grant making a home in the newly built Tori Town and will sell Link a Hylian shield should the first one break, as well as several rare armors such as the rubber and barbarian armor sets. The shock arrows are also really good at hunting. For the most part, using elemental arrows isn't very effective for hunting, and you really wouldn't want to waste them on hunting birds and bears and deer and all that. It's going to alter the type of meat attained by the animals as well by either freezing it or cooking it depending on the type of arrow used. So shock arrows are unique in that they allow the player to hunt animals in dangerous environments such as Death Mountain and the Tabantha region without the meat being affected by the environment. Using a shock arrow on an Eden ostrich is one of the only ways to get a raw whole bird, while the effect that shock arrows have in water makes them perfect for catching multiple fish, as the shock effect will literally kill all the fish in the area and prevent them from swimming off when Link gets close. Pretty cool tactic right there. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I have way more Zelda content on the channel, so be sure to click on one of the 2 videos popping up on the screen in a moment here. If you are new, consider subscribing, continue to be the light, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Let's go ahead and click on one of those videos. I'll see you over there.